I have Maxwell Ayiko Edmonds Drati here with me today, and he is here to talk about poetry. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Can't
Good.
complain.
Good. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, a little bit about me. I'm from Richmond, California. Born in San Francisco, but in the Bay about my whole life. Lived in Antioch for the last 3 years of high school. And now I'm going back to school in San Francisco, so kind of a full rounded moment.
Cool.
Yeah.
I know one of your hobbies is writing poetry. How'd you get into that?
Yeah, how did I get into like doing poetry? I think the first time I ever had written a poem, I was a freshman in college and it was for my Writing for Human Rights seminar. And I wrote this piece about incarceration of black men. I remember just performing it for honestly my a non-black class and just seeing the impact that it had on people and having people come up to me later and say how amazing it was and how interested they were in learning more about the different subjects and things like that was really inspiring. So I think really just in that moment understanding that words actually do have power was really what kind of jump started me getting more into it.
So, would you say that you have a specific audience, like people with similar experiences to you, or it can be for a general audience and people can interpret it in any way?
I say it really depends on the poem. I think obviously a lot of places I perform I think are very black, very Latin. A lot of places I'm invited to perform are very black and very Latin, but I think my poems are for general audiences. I remember I had a friend, he's a Hawaiian artist, and he had told me some artists make art because they have an itch they want to scratch, but I make art because I have a message I want to send. I kind of subscribe to that notion. Like my art is very much made with the idea that I have a message that I want to convey, and I think that anybody, regardless of class, race, gender, can receive that message and hopefully, learn from it, and hopefully it has an impact on their life.
So, what are some of the themes and ideas that you articulate in your poems?
Themes and ideas. Really, a lot of it is about mental health. I think, especially as a man, particularly as a black man, mental health is not something that we tend to talk about within our community. It's not something that's really uplifted a lot. And oftentimes, I think positive mental health and emotional stability is honestly something that's demonized within the culture, just at large. But, again, kind of going back to my community. So I like to talk a lot about mental health. I like to talk about positivity, just little things that get us through the day today. And I just like to talk, I think, about, you know, human connection, really. Like that's kind of the thing. I think a lot of times we kind of put people into boxes, we put things into boxes. This thing is for that type of person, that thing is for that type of person. But in reality, it's like, boxes don't exist. A lot of these lines are fake. And I think what I like to focus on in my poems is kind of releasing the veil and demystifying a lot of these things that we've kind of compartmentalized and assigned to only some people and making it something that everyone can enjoy. Like I have a poem about hip hop, just literally explaining the entire background of hip hop that I think a lot of people hear and it's like, oh, I never knew this. You know what I'm saying? Because you may not have had exposure to it.
So, with all those ideas, what is your writing space like? Is it in the comfort of your own home? Do you bounce ideas off of friends?
I'm honestly not even friends with a lot of poets. A lot of my friends make music or they do film and things like that. I think really when I'm writing, I like to do it in a space where I feel comfortable in, but it changes again just depending on the poem. Sometimes I like sitting outside, looking at birds, people watching, and I get a thought and I write it right then and there. Sometimes I'm on BART and I'm writing it right then and there. I think a consistent thing for me is I like to be where there's noise. I like to be where there's people. I like to be where there's things because I draw my inspiration from the daily interactions that I think a lot of us just pass in the moment, but can be significant in ways that we wouldn't have even thought of. So for me, it's just like really, I don't like to think that I write my poems in solitude. I like to be out and about in the world, feeling like I'm connecting with the places and the spaces that I want to write about.
Yeah. So, what would you say is the most challenging aspect when you write your poems? Is it figuring out the rhythm, figuring out the lyrics, memorizing the lyrics? What's the most challenging aspect?
The most challenging aspect is making something that you like. Like making something that like you genuinely can just say I'm proud of is the hardest thing. I would say it's not really even the assonance or the wordplay or any of that. I think Actually, no, it's a little bit of the wordplay. I take that back. It's definitely a little bit of the wordplay. But I think it's, going back to the idea of you have a message that you want to send. I think a lot of times when you're a poet and you're performing on a stage, especially when you're getting paid for something, like someone's paying you to deliver a feeling, you kind of struggle a lot with having an idea of who you're creating this poem for. Am I creating it for me, or am I creating it for my audience? You know what I'm saying? And I think when you're creating it for an audience, it feels very depersonalized, and just trying to figure out a way to create something for other people that can still connect back to you is really difficult. That being said, I think really the way that I've kind of managed to push through that has just been communicating a message, but with my voice. And so I think that's where it goes into wordplay, like you were saying. Because sometimes I'm talking about things that, frankly, I don't really have a lot of experience talking about. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it's not what's the correct, so I have to sometimes think not what's the correct way to talk about this subject. I have to think about what's the Maxwell way, to talk about this subject.
Right. So with that being said, what is your writing process? Do you draw from your own experiences, primarily the media? What inspires you?
I think what inspires me, what really just gets me pushing and what gets me going in day-to-day life is love, honestly. Not even just love for people. It's just love for life. It's love for those around me. It's love for my community. It's love for everything, just even having the blessing to be able to wake up and draw breath. That's love of life, And I think that's really my inspiration to write, and what I draw a lot from. A lot of my things have to do with, like I said, mental health and community. And I think like media is definitely something that I get exposed to, and it will have me like, oh man, that sucks. But even in those moments, I don't think I write from a place of anger. It's more like I see the sorrow that my community is impacted by, the sorrow that other communities are impacted by. And when I decide to write a piece about it, I'm not really writing a piece about the incident that occurred. I'm writing a piece about overcoming that pain and finding that love within yourself. So I think, like love, joy, and persistence is really what inspires my writing.
So you write and perform, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I know a handful of people that are hesitant to perform. What advice do you have for fellow poets that don't have the confidence to bring their writing to the stage?
Yeah, I think my real advice, like if you're struggling to perform, I've had a lot of people ask me that, like after my shows and things like that. I think my honest advice is do what you feel like is right when you feel ready, but just know there may come a time where you never necessarily feel ready. Sometimes you just have to jump into the pool. I told this one girl I know some advice my grandfather had given my mother, who my mother then gave to me, which is that, everybody wants to be fearless. Everybody wants to be fearless, but no one's fearless. It's not about getting to the point where you're not afraid. It's about getting to the point where you're willing to overcome that fear in order to reap the benefits that may come from you being persistent and being tenacious. And so my advice to people who are nervous to perform, who are scared to perform, who are scared to put their voices out there is just know that by overcoming this, not only are you being a benefit to you, you might be a benefit to other people. Because there's definitely been times in my life where I've written about vulnerable things that I've experienced throughout life, vulnerable things people in my life have experienced, who they were okay with me telling their story to audiences and such like that. And I've had people come up to me after and say, crying even sometimes, saying, that was really impactful, that was beautiful, thank you so much, this, that, and the other, you made my day, comments like that. And just understanding that in that moment, if you're brave enough to overcome your fear, you might inspire the person next to you to be brave enough to overcome their fear.
Besides poetry having an impact on other people, I want to talk about the impact it has on you. Would you say performing your poetry acts as a form of catharsis? And if so, what qualities of performing poetry makes it cathartic?
It's 100% cathartic. Like, I think when you are writing a poem, it almost feels like you're looking in a mirror for the first time. It's like you finish a piece and you're looking down at a piece of glass in the form of paper with all these scratch marks on it and like lead smudges and things like that, and you're like looking at it and you're like, wow, that's me. you know? And then when you perform that piece, it's like not only are you saying that's me, when you're performing it, it's almost like this is who I can be. You feel empowered when you say it. It doesn't just feel like a weight's been lifted off your shoulders. It feels like you're standing on shoulders of a giant, you know? And I just think like it's this really overwhelming feeling that I can't compare to anything else except for maybe skydiving. You know, so it's like, yeah, and I think like the aspects of it that makes it cathartic is just really just kind of going back to that bravery piece, is you get a bit of an adrenaline rush, you know, like you finally had the bravery to say what it is you've been wanting to say maybe your entire life that you didn't even know you wanted to say. And you've gone from not even being able to have that conversation with you to being able to have that conversation with 250 people.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
And I know that writing poetry requires a lot of inward thinking and self-reflection. How do you navigate the line between personal vulnerability and public exposure in your work? Do you ever regret sharing vulnerability with your audience?
Oh, that's, man.
How do you balance the two?
Balancing it, I mean, I guess it's really just figuring out what's more for you and what's more to inspire others, you know? Like, I know, for example, there's a woman, Native American woman, brilliant, wrote a book called Bad Indians, and it was really inspiring. But in the book and in talking to us, she had certain points where she was talking about things that are really touchy, like sexual assault, or like these day-to-day experiences and past experiences that Native people have had, and even talking about herself and her experiences with her father and people in her life was like, wow, that was a lot, you know, like I'm sure that must have been a lot for her, but I think for her that was understanding that this story is going to help somebody else. And I think that's really how I find the balance between the two, understanding what's really for me and what's really for other people, because there's definitely times where I might write about something that's more personal for me that I'm not going to perform, and I just like knowing that I was willing to have that conversation with myself. But there's other things that I may write about where it's like, okay, like I'm willing to share this with the world and have that conversation, not just because I know, oh, this will benefit me, because it's going to benefit you. Right. You know, like I know that we don't talk about this and you need help and I need help and he, she, we all need the help. So it's like I'm going to be the one to really break the proverbial glass ceiling on this.
And in your opinion, I know this is a very broad question, but what do you think is the purpose of writing poetry and performing it?
Poetry is about romance, it's about beauty, it's about life. Poetry is one of those things that just makes life worth living. I mean, like, how many times have you, like, come home and you, for instance, I don't know, popped out a nice book with a glass of wine, or you come back with your partner and you guys watch a romantic movie, or you're willing to spend 15, 18, 30 something dollars on tickets for you and your friends to go see that new thriller that just popped out. Poetry's like that. It's one of those things that just makes life worth living. Like, without things like art, without things like poems, without things like movies or sports or whatever else, life would just kind of be us surviving. And I don't know if that's necessarily a life worth living, you know? So I think to me, poetry is one of those things that has brought about self-awakening for me and has made me feel comfortable with living, but also it's honestly, it's honestly increased my livelihood. And I think really that's the purpose of writing. Other people might say something different. I know, like I said earlier, like for me, I have a message I want to send, and that's definitely also part of it. Like, you have a message you want to send, but I also think sometimes having a dragon to slay is sometimes what makes life worth living too. And I think poetry is just a conduit for that.
For sure. Are there any poets or performers or activists that you look up to?
Oh, 100%. Definitely. The number one activist I look up to, his name is Fred Hampton. I love Fred Hampton because he uplifts not only the black community, but all communities of oppressed people as well, with a focus on creating a structure where we can be truly liberated within ourselves by having love and compassion for one another and an ability to determine our own freedoms. Fred Hampton promoted the idea of the Rainbow Party, which came into existence and took these Latin kids and these Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, and brought them together with the Black Panthers and with poor whites in the South and combined us all. And I think I really look up to that because I think all of our freedoms intertwined with one another. So he's an activist I looked up to. Now, an artist I look up to is James Baldwin. I love James Baldwin. Absolutely adore him. And the reason why is because James Baldwin lived in a point in history that was so drastically different from what I could ever conceive living in today's time. And he did that as a dark-skinned man like me, but also as a gay man, which is something that's like so that's a completely different experience from what I've had in my life. You know, the segregation, discrimination I've had to deal with. I look up to Baldwin because he was willing to be himself in a world that told him that he was a bane to humanity. I look up to Baldwin because he was willing to create his art in a world where people told him that his words meant nothing. And I think for someone living in today's time, where I've definitely gotten those sentiments from people around me or from societal messaging, it's really uplifting to think that somebody was able to go through something. I know it's not supposed to be an oppression Olympics, but someone went through something a lot worse than I did, and they were able to see the light at the end of the tunnel and live a happy life. And for me, like, I want that. So I really look up to James Baldwin.
So you're a political science major, right?
Yep.
What are your academic and career goals, and how do those goals align with the themes that you articulate in your poetry?
In terms of career, really, I just want to continue to be a writer, and I want to tell the stories that we oftentimes don't get to hear. I want to tell the stories from the people that oftentimes don't have a voice, and I just want to continue to uplift the people, hopefully with my words, the way I have been, but on a larger scale. And my ultimate goal is I want to be part of the legislative body in California. I want to help institute policy and change policy that harms people. And I just want to continue and hopefully magnify the amount of research I do with things like criminal justice reform and housing rights and economic rights for not just the Black community, but frankly the Latin, Native, and Asian communities as well.
Right. I know you do a lot of events showcasing your poetry, and I most recently heard about the event that you did, the Black Panther Party event. Could you tell me more about that and why you chose to perform there?
Yeah, the Black Panther Party event was the free annual breakfast celebration. And so, for those who don't know what the Black Panther Party is, it's an organization that was created in the 60s meant to uplift the Black community and help us determine our own futures politically and economically as well. They have a whole 10-point manifesto I'm sure people could look up. Fred Hampton, one of my idols, was also the chairman of that party. The reason why I decided to do it was because I was invited by a former Black Panther named Catherine Powell, and also because I really wanted to feel like I had the opportunity to give back to not only my community, but the people who served it as well. I wanted to have the chance to really be able to pay thanks and homage to those folks, and just having the opportunity to serve breakfast to Black Panther alumni who served breakfast to children when they were my age was like such a beautiful experience. And just even being able to feed kids and uplift the Fillmore, which historically has been oppressed, it was so fulfilling, and I honestly loved it. The kids loved it. I'm happy the kids loved it. And I don't know, it was a really fulfilling experience.
Awesome. That sounds like a great opportunity. But where do you typically perform, and why do you choose those places to perform?
Yeah, I perform everywhere. A lot of times at colleges, but also Gold Beams in Oakland. I'm gonna plug my people real quick.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Gold Beams in Oakland, second Mondays. They're amazing spaces. It's FUBU space, for us, by us. You know, for Black artists. Perform at Gold Beams. Perform at the Starry Night Plow in Berkeley. Historic slam poetry spot for the people. And Oak Stop as well, Black-owned business in downtown Oakland. The AAACC, African American Arts and Culture Complex in the Fillmore, and today, yeah, SF State. So I think the reason why I choose the spaces where I want to perform is, I think it's honestly because I want to. I always joke with my friends because like, Maxwell, you go everywhere. Like, you literally go everywhere. I'm like, I'm where the culture is, you know, and that's where I want to go. That's where I want to be. I want to be in a place where I feel like my words can have the maximum impact for people who can relate to them. because there's different messages for different people.
Right.
You know, but I like to connect with my people. I like to connect with people who come from places unlike my own as well. I like the opportunity to learn, and frankly, sometimes going into places to perform, like in the Mission or like in Soma or like in these other places, is such a beautiful experience because I get to share a bit of my culture with other people, and I get to also hear a bit of theirs.
Nice. Okay, well, if you want to hear Maxwell perform live, that's where you want to go. And yeah, that's all the questions I have for you today. Thank you for being here.
Nice, thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah.